people. We're back. We've got another podcast episode. We're back in familiar settings. I don't know if that adds anything to really continuity as far as that goes, but hopefully it maintains a little bit of sense of stability now with the constant jumping around in locations. But I'm Dom. That's Chris, movie and TV nerd. Welcome back to the Talking TV channel. And Chris, I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted.
I think you guys know I normally set up everything behind me. The fact that I didn't do that, I think shows.
Yeah.
That was one of our longest live streams.
It was really long. Was that 3 hours? I think
3 hours and 15,
something like that. That shit was longer than Avengers Endgame, and it felt longer.
Yeah. It was fun though. Thanks to everyone who caught our live watch of Inception on its 10-year anniversary. It was a good time.
Absolutely, yeah. I still can't believe that movie's 10 years old. But anyways, so Chris, we're back with another podcast episode after 2 weeks, I would say, of hectic madness because just technology hates us, and just with how that schedule of the last 2 weeks worked. We're back to, I don't know, would you consider this another somewhat serious topic? Only because last week's topic kind of didn't exactly go the way that we intended for it to go. It was kind of started off as one way and then kind of went in a completely different direction for us. So,
no, I know what you mean. So this is interesting because I feel like this is a topic that we've spoken about ad nauseum with our crew, Pat, and who you guys know is a friend of the show, but we never really brought it to the show. We'll always talk about this after a movie at when we go to Buffalo Wild Wings or to a diner. We'll sort of sit down and sort of talk about how streaming, specifically Netflix, has really impacted the landscape of modern creators, but we never brought it to the show. So serious, I don't know, but it kind of comes up a lot in our casual conversation. So I'm excited to elaborate on it here. You know what I mean? Yeah,
definitely. The topic of today's discussion is Netflix originals and what they are actually doing. I mean, it's not really just about originals, but we'll call it today for Netflix originals, just how they've impacted the overall streaming sphere and just the overall media sphere in general, and how we perceive media now, because I think it's a big topic. We've talked about it a lot for on a lot of different other episodes, but I think it's time that obviously we've seen now we're kind of on the latter end of the effect of seeing kind of the effect that streaming has had. So it's definitely worthy to take a look into it, actually break it down, get a little intellectual for you guys, which I think is what we usually do.
I think we try to, at least.
Yeah.
And I think lately more so than usual we have been.
Yeah, most definitely, especially with last week's episode. Oh man, I still can't get over how serious that was.
Dude, I listened to that one twice this past week. That's just how proud I am of it,
Yeah, it's in depth.
Yeah, sometimes you got to appreciate what you do, because why are you doing it, right?
Exactly.
And Dom, you kind of came up with something that we like to tell people about with our show.
Yeah, you keep reminding me of it. I don't know why I keep forgetting to. No, I don't know why I keep forgetting to bring it up. It's kind of that's bad of me as a co-host, because I should.
I feel like you're embarrassed of it, but I think it's awesome.
I'm not. It's not that I'm embarrassed by it. It's that's not the right word choice. I would say it's because I want to fine tune it and make it sound and flow better. Because halfway point between critics and commentators, it's a good log line, but it needs to flow better.
You don't think it broadcasts as well as it reads? In other words,
I really don't.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming from with that.
We're kind of, I guess we're at this point. Hey, we've established that we're going to be open about the process. So I think it's better than what we had.
It's whatever. I'd prefer to be open about the process, but as opposed to my end, I still really like the work that you did with the graphics in the background. By the way, it looks really cool. I feel like I'm floating through space right now. I feel like I'm in that episode of Community where Ahmed and Troy are flying in those paper boxes in space.
Oh, I love that.
And he's oh man, and he's like, I'm on your 6. Yeah, I'm on your 6. It's like I'm still on your 6. You can't be on my 6. I took evasive maneuvers. That was great,
dude. I love the whole episode when Annie moves in, and they made her the blanket fort because they didn't want to give up their imagination. What do they call
it? Their dreamatorium.
Yeah.
Their dreamatorium. Oh my god, what a bunch of nonsense! But I love it. It's the best sitcom ever made. But we're not here to talk about that. Well, actually, we kind of are in a way, which is funny because obviously that besides Netflix originals, Netflix's whole process of incorporating kind of old niche shows has obviously proven to be a huge hit for them. And that's actually something that I did want to bring up today. But so Chris, first and foremost, before we dive into this, I guess kind of what would you say your first your kind of your relationship, because that's really what we are. We're basically in a relationship with all these different streaming services at this point. Where would you say your relationship with Netflix started? What was the first streaming service that they had that really caught your eye?
For me,
for show, I should say. I just realized.
Yeah, for me, it was the ability to rewatch Lost ad nauseum, and also without Netflix, I would have never have kind of gotten into The Office and been able to watch the last season live because I was able to binge it. So that was the first time I binged something to catch up with the finale, which was really cool. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of weird. And I've done that with so many shows since, but like if we're gonna go back to like I think sophomore, junior year of high school when I first got Netflix and was going in on it every night before sleep, just watching episode after episode, first binging, the early days of binging, it had to be Lost, being able to just revisit that whenever I wanted without having to get up to swap out the DVDs, which was so nice.
Yeah,
kind of forget living in the Stone Age.
And it's actually funny. Yeah, and I'm glad that you actually bring that up because I would say that for a majority of people, right, that's kind of their go-to stuff. Like obviously we talk about all these crazy great Netflix originals. For me, like it's a few because my whole thing where I got invested with them was their original programming because I was one of the first House of Cards fans in from the ground up, like back when it was only 2 seasons on Netflix. That was kind of the first like big like putting a lot of money into an original TV series that was broadcast entirely on a streaming service. And people don't give House of Cards enough credit because that was the show that kind of set the moniker of dropping all the episodes at once rather than waiting week to week episodically to watch them. Obviously that had been a thing with like DVD viewing for TV for years now. Obviously Netflix with their original distribution model.
It had already aired at that point, though. You were
right, but
buying...
A, they'd already aired, and B, for the most part, when it came to new shows, people were still used to that old school model of watching it a week at a time. But the thing about House of Cards is that was the first time where it's like, oh, this is a brand new show, and I can just go on and watch like all the episodes at once, where it's like that kind of set the tone. It's like, oh, so this is how that kind of sent a message out to the rest of the other traditional TV networks that, oh, this is the new way of how things are done. And so I don't think House of Cards gets enough credit there. But and
I agree. It doesn't help that Kevin Spacey went and did horrible things.
Had done horrible things at that point. But
yeah.
But I guess my problem with it became that after that, Netflix kind of really didn't know what stance they wanted to take. And so this kind of brings us into, I would say, my problem, if you will, with them. Like I said, I don't even know if it's really a problem. It's more so just like, it's just the way that they do things, which is that Netflix, and rightfully so, because this is the time and day and age that we live in, but it's also kind of their fault because they also kind of sort of kickstarted this model, is Netflix just has no interest in like finding and sticking with one thing. Their business model that they've done since day one is just, okay, let's just funnel all this money into a bunch of different things and drop them. Who cares about the quality? Who cares? Like, we don't know how these shows do because they don't release their numbers at all. So then they just drop something, and kind of the only determining factor that we have in order to measure the show's success is word of mouth. But even that's unreliable time because sometimes word of mouth gets propelled for like a not good show. So to me, at least, like that's why whenever I look at Netflix's model for success, I can't look at their originals because they're too few and far between, and there's also too many of them to really keep track of what's successful or not. To me, I go to, like what you mentioned, the repeat viewings, because I know for a fact that all my friends, when they were watching Netflix stuff in college, they were not watching new shows for the most part. They were watching reruns of The Office and reruns of other old shows, Parks and Rec and all that. So I guess kind of like what's your take on that whole thing? Because it's bugged me for a long time, but it's not something that really seems to bother everybody else, mostly because I think that's for the most part they're still like the big thing to watch, so it's probably just a me thing.
I think that they are still the number one streaming service outside of just the monetary aspect, which they clearly beat all the other competitors in. I think just as far as like I guess if you have fans for a streaming service, which is a funny sentence, but we're really diving in here. So I'm taking the plunge. And I think as far as fandom goes for a streaming service, yeah, Netflix by far has the most. Probably, Amazon, Disney Plus, and Hulu wouldn't be too far behind. And then you have all the other random ones like Shudder for horror and whatnot. And those ones are just, I think struggling to survive.
There's a lot of streaming services, though, to say the least.
Now
like
there
new one, like that Quibi thing that popped up, Crackle. Like I think Criterion was trying to launch their first one. Now HBO, now HBO is into it with HBO Max. Like everybody like has a streaming service now, almost to the point where it's comical.
Yeah, but I think what Netflix did was they were the first to the game, but they also used that advantage. They used that positioning to their advantage they really revolutionized the way that we view TV. I mean, first of all, commercial free was something
Right.
that
was a
they
big thing,
started
too.
really, and then YouTube even adopted off of Netflix's with their premium service. But you got to remember, Netflix was the first company in the streaming world to build into the price no commercials. They built that into your subscription fee, which really changed the game, you know. And it's almost, I think, Hulu's downfall, the fact that they are the streaming service with multiple tiers, because no one wants to pay the extra few dollars to not have commercials on Hulu,
Right.
for the most part, because unless you're like a huge anime fan or you're into some weird obscure genre that Hulu's cornered the market of, their mainstream competition in regards to, like, you know, HBO, Disney Plus, Netflix, they're kind of like the weakest one. You know what I
It's
mean?
a good thing. I guess it's a good thing that Hulu is now owned by Disney, because like that to me is the only reason why that is still alive, because that because what Hulu has become now is Hulu has kind of become like FX's model, because ever since Fox got bought up by Disney, they just put all the new FX original shows right on Hulu, which is great for accessibility, because that allows a lot of the really great FX shows to now be accessed really easily. But again, the problem is that who is going to go out of their way in order to spend that much extra money in order for Hulu? Because the other thing too that people don't consider, I guess, enough is just, I don't know about you, I haven't been on Hulu's app as well, but to me, I don't think it's as user-friendly as Netflix is too. And just for the most part, like, Netflix still has like a really user-friendly model, like just the way that their site is designed. You know, Disney Plus tried to emulate that while also still having their own unique look, but Disney Plus still has buggy problems occasionally, like, but that's just getting into the technicals. But I guess then just my own selfish desire then is, because if we could jump ship for a moment from the business model into the actual entertainment aspect, I guess my own personal problem with it is the fact that because so much of their content, they funnel so much money into all of these different random content, and for like every one thing that might hit, there's like 15 others that'll just come in and nobody will watch or know about, but they're just there. And like, that's great from a business standpoint, because it creates a lot of job opportunities and it creates a lot of just different and varied content. But I guess the problem is that they've kind of, in a way, Netflix has also oversaturated the market. And I know you and I have talked a lot recently about why it seems so difficult for shows to break through, and how for every new show that we try to recommend, there's like 15 others that people are trying to recommend. It's just, we can't keep up. And it's a thing that I've been hearing about for years now, just like that there's too much TV, there's too much content, you know. But obviously the flip side of that is, you know, there's never been a better time for content. And both of those arguments have a lot of legitimacy to them. But I guess the question is, like, is there a way to maintain a balance? Because I don't know about you, but to me, part of the majesty of TV is having that one it show. You know, like, to me, there's a reason why shows like Succession and Barry are so special, because those shows to me are the it shows now, if you could even call them that. You know, but they also have the advantage of being on HBO. And the thing about HBO to me, and why I've always considered them as one of Netflix, is HBO's always put more into quality over quantity, versus Netflix just seems to be the opposite. You know?
Yeah. So I actually have a couple thoughts about this. For a quick second, to use Hulu is for FX shows, and so that's what I think is carrying them. I know so many people who are in that same boat. So Hulu is just losing altogether. But what blows my mind is, and why I just can't understand how Netflix still continues to win, is because you're right. The quantity is so, first off, intense. And the only marketing Netflix really does, outside of like the shows that they put a little outside world marketing, like maybe like there was, I know some people tweeted a billboard of Space Force in LA, but there was not really like that many commercials. I saw a few TV commercials for Space Force. I've seen a few TV commercials for like Cloverfield Paradox, but for every one show they market, there's 100 shows that don't go anywhere. I mean, and then Netflix also does these weird viral pushes in regards to Bird Box, where they just have someone create a bunch of memes and they try to fake people into thinking it's a good film, but they take such a chance on not marketing but relying on viral content. And I guess it's because the strength of their subscription base is so strong they can take that risk. But don't you think you would get more money if you put in some traditional marketing? I don't understand that, to be honest with you.
I'll add one further thing to that too, is why for all of their viral streaming does it only seem to market their crappy content? You know, like the viral marketing, it worked for Cloverfield Paradox and Bird Box, but those two both sucked. And for the most part, like, everybody who I knew that watched those two, like, hated them, you know? So like, I think that was just like where I started to worry, because that to me was, I'm like, oh no, they're now going to go the route of everyone else, which is where they don't care about the quality of their stuff. They just, you know, just as many views as they want, you know, like this ridiculously hacky, tacky advertise, you know, like viral marketing method actually fooled enough dumb people to watch this thing and could probably figure out that they were watching something that was bullshit, but because it just seemed cool online, oh, it's just like 1.5 billion views. Not that we would even know that, because again, they don't release their number. So like, it's just, to me, it's just like, it's too much power in one studio's cards. And I feel like I would just like appreciate it more if they like just actually use that to like, you know, it's like it always kills me. It's a kind of the same problem that I have with Disney, which is where like you have all of this money and all of this power. Why are you not taking the advantage of like pushing some more risky and interesting content? You know, like you're gonna make your money back regardless. You know, like those are just the things about business that don't make sense to me.
Totally. The one cool thing that Netflix does is they'll do like creator deals where they'll sort of like invest in a guy. Like I know Adam Sandler's done a bunch of movies with Netflix, and they sort of trust their creators, which is awesome. And by, you know, creating that many different productions, sure, you don't have as many big name celebrities maybe coming out because there's such a flooded competitive space that you're all tossing your hat into the same ring. But like you said, you are creating a lot of jobs, you know, and that is great because dude, these film jobs are hard to get. And from what I understand, listening to interviews, reading articles, just because you're in the union, whatever union it is, electrician,
that doesn't mean anything. That
doesn't mean anything. You're still job to job, and it's still word of mouth. So that the fact that there's more jobs gives those hardworking, talented people a place to work. So I can't fault Netflix for that. But what I can fault them for is I think sort of undervaluing all of their content by just, again, going back to the lack of marketing. It's like you have Stranger Things, yet I still have never seen a television ad for Stranger Things.
Only things I ever see for Stranger Things are the YouTube trailers. But like I don't. But like, but the other problem too for me is I don't watch TV. I haven't had cable in 8 years, so. Like, I don't know what actually plays on TV.
And I listen to a bunch of podcasts each week. I watch a bunch of different YouTube channels. I have rarely seen Netflix pre-roll ads. I've never seen a Netflix radio ad. I don't get it. Are they content with the amount of money they have? Isn't corporations' goals just to keep raking it in? I don't understand.
I guess the thing is that I don't necessarily fault them, because to me, obviously, the whole thing that I always go by, a big thing that I've talked about, is how I hate how, to me, kind of almost the traditional movie marketing mentality, a lot of alliteration there, has kind of ruined for me a lot of like kind of new and interesting movies that I feel like I would have liked otherwise if not for marketing, you know, like what, like just again, bringing it back to my Marvel, look at my Captain Marvel review. Like I like that movie so much more on the hindsight of the marketing, you know? And it's just like, the problem is that like, there are still these good movies that are trying to break through the barriers, but they're just so held back by the marketing machine. And I get it. Marketing is necessary, but I don't know if it's just like the way that it's marketed or whatever. But like it almost always kills the hype for me for a movie, you know? Like you look at A24. A24 is another thing that almost thrives off of like trolling their audience into thinking that they're going to get something when it's not, you know, like specifically with a few of their horror movies that haven't liked. Now they're a little bit more hit or miss with that as far as I'm concerned. But Netflix, so in that sense, I kind of admire Netflix for not going the ad route, just having such a strong faith in their fan base and the power of their brand that they just feel they don't feel the need to market it. You know, they drop like a few YouTube trailers, and that to them is enough to like get people to get word of mouth and get enough eyes on them, you know? But I don't know. Like, I guess my problem comes from the fact also, sorry, what I was saying is that like, I understand also from that standpoint, because the thing is, again, they do take a lot of risks and they do have a lot of risky, interesting subject matter that like might not work as far as traditional marketing goes.
Yeah, so as far as there's a few shows that come to mind. Like you couldn't put that German show Dark that everyone's talking about, like the Deep Side. You couldn't put that on standard television and have that get viewers. But it's becoming a cult hit. Or look at Jonah Hill's Maniac. You know, you couldn't put that, I think, in this day and age on traditional television. So they're good for that. And I can't fault them 100% for the lack of marketing, because I think there is something special about like that little tiny show that no one thought was going to make it, aka Stranger Things, becoming a massive hit. You know, but it's just like, it's just weird to me. It's such a weird, relaxed corporate culture. Sorry to chime in there. I just kind of
no, that's good. No, I'm glad.
I want to hear what your gripe is. You know,
no, these things, like I said, are fascinating to me. But like, like I've already kind of made clear what my gripes are. And like I said, it's the selfish part of me, because I'm a watcher first and foremost, and I want good content. I want stuff that when I watch it is not going to be derivative and remind me of, and not rely on cheap TV tropes and cliches, and actually have interesting, new and different characters and stories. And I guess just the fact that if they are constantly putting all of this time and money into just putting out as much stuff as possible, and to me, it undervalues the creators that are involved, because to me, it kills me when I see something that actually is good, that I actually do enjoy, that I do think is like an interesting and unique thing that more people should be watching, because it is giving kind of a new edge and pushing these stories further than they ever would have been on traditional TV. But because it's just so overflowed with content, like they never have a shot in hell, unless they have like a big name celebrity too. Like to me, like I guess kind of like my Netflix cult show, where it's like, again, it's got its diehard fans, but like outside of that fan base, I have not heard a single person talk about it. It's this delightful little show called On My Block, which is a coming of age show about a group of all Hispanic and African American kids growing up in the slums of in the hood of LA. But it's a sitcom mostly. But the thing is that it's a sitcom that while still having a lot of like sitcom cliches and tropes, like the wacky characters and like the spring and like the quick, very fast-paced dialogue, it also is not afraid to actually tackle like some very real and disturbing subject matters. And that's insane to me, because like that's never anything that you would expect to see in a traditional sitcom, because sitcoms are all about keeping it safe, And so it infuriates me even more when something like Space Force, which could not be more boring or derivative of a million other things that we've seen before that are better, be so watched just because of the celebrity that's involved with it, and it adds nothing. There's no entertainment value to that show, and it kills me that seems to be the things that work for Netflix.
Yeah, and to add on to your sort of On My Block sort of train of thought, there's another show that I think is an amazing sitcom, a brilliant show called Atypical, which was that what you thought I was going to say?
Oh, I thought you were going to go with Kim's Convenience, but Atypical was my second choice.
Kim's Convenience is awesome as well. That's sort of where it's shown in America. That is a CBC show, Canadian Broadcast Channel show.
The same channel that does shit.
But it's partnered with Netflix for America. So I actually have two things to say about that. Netflix does a great job of giving these sort of, like you said, shows that definitely would not make it. I mean, if you guys don't know about Atypical, check it out. It's about an autistic kid who's struggling with growing up and moving out of the house and sort of combating just daily life. And it's absolutely brilliant. It's heartfelt. It's touching. And they do such a good job sort of giving this kind of representation, which you would not see on like an ABC or a Fox or whatever. You would not see that. They do a great job of getting that show made, getting those voices a platform, which is awesome. But then they don't promote it.
Right.
And then another thing they do is they do a great job of partnering with the BBC to bring shows over such as Peaky Blinders or Frankenstein, but then they don't promote it. They just kind of feed you to their algorithm. And I don't know. I mean, it seems people are okay with this, which is fine.
I haven't heard anybody complain about it. Like I've not, like, of all the millions upon millions of things that people complain about online that, quite frankly, I find really dumb and don't really add any substance of matter to the discussion of like how we could actually further critique and get some more interesting stories. Like, this is the one thing to me that, like, I feel like there is a legitimate argument to be made here, but nobody's talking about it because nobody seems to care, because everybody just seems content with just just consuming all of this content. It kind of feeds right into something that has frankly terrified me over the last couple of years, which is that people have just stopped wanting to think about their content and just consume it, which has always been the case, like that's always been the case. You're tired after a long day at work, a long week at work. You just want to sit back and relax. You want your comfort food and everything, but every once in a while, there was always that one nugget that was able to get through that had everybody talking to me, like to me, like, again, I talked about this ad nauseum, but to me, the majesty of TV is so like the fact that we got shows like Breaking Bad, like The Sopranos, like Game of Thrones, like all of these groundbreaking, revolutionary TV shows that seek to actually push their stories in new and interesting directions and actually wanted to get people to think about them rather than just being mindless entertainment, like I can't help but wonder that if it was this type of an environment, like none of those shows would be a thing and TV would be just as disposable as it was back in the day, because that was always the problem to me with the problem of why back in the day nobody took television seriously, was because they regarded it as a disposable medium. They thought they figured that it wasn't made for, and it would never be as profitable as the theatrical movie-going experience. It was just a quick and cheap way to run ads, right? The whole thing was that television was an advertiser's game, first and foremost, with those Nielsen ratings, and the entertainment was just a cheap way to do that. And to me, like, the fact that it evolved into this stance of being able to give us arguably content that now is on the level, if not far surpassing the stuff that we get in theaters, is astounding to me, and and the thing to me about Netflix is both a part of that success, but it's also very, very much detrimenting it.
Yeah, and to sort of that tune, although not quite in the same wheelhouse, but I think it comes from the same sentiment, is the fact that if you look at how we are sort of fed by all these algorithms, right? We always kind of openly joke about the fact that like the YouTube algorithm is God and we must serve God and whatnot on this show. And so I kind of a long time ago stopped taking people's suggestions for individual shows that were Netflix originals,
Same.
that were all this stuff, because I was like, well, I don't like what you're offering me. And so I've been kind of
Yeah.
thinking about like, why is that the case? And it's because everyone's algorithm slowly over time, it learns and it gets to know what you like. So you might get a Netflix original show that I've never heard of and that may never even cross on top of my suggested in Netflix, just because of the fact that we watch somewhat different things. So there's only a few people that I really take suggestions from now. And I think the algorithm has kind of like divided us in a sense. And I think that's why you have a lot of these Netflix shows, while they are mainstream, some of them, like your Stranger Things and your House of Cards, there's more so like smaller cult followings. Like if you look at, Ricky Gervais's Afterlife, like the people I know who have actually seen that show love it and worship it, but there's not many of them. You know what I mean? And the people that I know who have seen Atypical, they love it, but there's not many of them. And it's just because there's so much content. So it makes me wonder, like, okay, it's probably a paycheck now to get your show picked up by Netflix, and that's cool. It very much so could
absolutely
take off and become a Stranger Things, or at the very least become a cult. But for all of these shows that we're talking about that have made it to an extent, how many of them haven't? You know, it's
again,
almost dangerous.
It's the 1-2 punch, because on the one hand, again, it is so much easier now. And again, I'm being facetious because again, the fact of getting anything produced and sold to a local studio is amazing in and of itself. But the fact of the matter is, it is so much easier now because technology and the algorithms made it so much more easy for you to market something that in the past might have seemed unmarketable. Because if there's one thing that the internet and watching content on the internet has proved, is that there is literally content for everybody. The idea of a niche market to me is no longer a thing, because before, to me, or at least at the very least, the term has changed. Because to me, before, a niche market was something that only a few people would go to, and it could sometimes develop enough of a following in order to like actually be profitable. But for the most part, it could just never compete with the mainstream. But now it almost seems like everything is niche, and it almost feels like you have to be more of a niche in order to stand out and just maybe having a chance of existing outside of your niche, But that kills me, because if that's the best that content creators can hope for, that they're just going to develop a niche of very specific fans and kind of never go beyond that, like that just seems kind of demeaning, because the whole point of making content to me in general is that it can potentially be seen and witnessed by everybody, And so if anything, I just find something that is supposed to be so much more, something that was originally supposed to would allow creators to get their stuff out to even more people. Now I find that it's kind of even more restricting in a way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think because I care so much about art, and I care so much specifically about like television, really, is that it kind of kills me, because like, it sucks that like this show Atypical, that I think is brilliant, that I really love, I had no part in creating it, but I'm such a fan that I think everyone should get out there and watch this show, just because, like I said, it's such an interesting viewpoint to get on a show, and it's just so charming and it's so wonderful, and I can't say enough good things about it. But it kills me to know that just because it's a slave to the algorithm like everything else, it's just under the submission of the Netflix algorithm, that hey, unless you're watching as many sitcoms as I do, you might not brush upon this hidden gem.
It's true.
And it just makes me, and Paul Rudd's newest show is such a great example.
Yeah.
A name like Paul Rudd, right?
Yep.
Doing a science fiction TV
Living
show
with
too.
yourself.
Something
Good
he hasn't
show.
done before, which had its few moments, but I don't think it crossed enough people's algorithms for it to be more than just that culty Netflix Paul Rudd show.
It was a fun, cute show, and Paul Rudd is a name, but like it didn't seem to hit into that echelon of like ever existing outside of its cult, like outside of like one person that I talked to who worked on it, like nobody even knows about that show,
Yeah, no one, and we were hyped on it.
And again, it's not like a groundbreaking game changer show in any way. If anything, again, it's another one of these sitcoms that actually seeks to like just tell a different kind of a story. And I appreciate that. And like the structure of how each episode was structured, I thought was very, very well done. But again, like because it's on Netflix, it's never going to exist outside of its niche, Now, the crazy thing to me is that like on stuff like Amazon or Hulu, again, like everyone regards them as being like kind of losing because they're always trying to play catch with Netflix. But the thing to me is that because they are not constantly rushing out to get as much content out as possible, I feel like with that, they can really funnel their marketing into one big show, and then you can get like kind of an it show, which to me like is why you get something like The Boys, you know? Like to me, like if The Boys was just another Netflix dump, nobody would be talking about it. Maybe a few, but to me, it would not exist outside of like its own individual niche. Mostly because Netflix has already had such a mirage of comic book properties. You know, with all the dark Netflix Marvel superhero adaptation that they did. Now they've got the Umbrella Academy. I know they've got a couple of other very niche comic book things. But to me, like The Boys does not become the thing that it is if it's put on Netflix, and that kills me because The Boys is one of my favorite new shows now. The Boys is what I look forward to now in these dark Corona times.
Yeah, I 100% I agree. And you know what I will say to that as well? The Hulu originals that I've watched, the Amazon originals that I've watched, while they are fewer and more far between than the amount of Netflix originals I've watched, they've always left me wanting more. They've always felt like they were worth my time. Whereas with Netflix, it always feels like a crapshoot, for a lack of a better word. It
feels like for every 10 of their shows that they put out, only one of them maybe might actually have a kernel. It kills me because to me, that's not how they used to do things. Like to me, Netflix, they would for the most part have that one it show that they would focus on, you know? And to me, that is what allowed for a lot of their early shows to actually have that echelon of success and IT, you know? Like there was a point where a lot of people were watching House of Cards, you know? And when BoJack Horseman came around, like there was not a show out that was like it, you know? And then Big Mouth kind of came out and ruined that because they wanted to make it like more friendly and, you know, and less like actually, you know, less like depressing, you know, but like stuff, but again, like even Stranger Things, you know, like Stranger Things was something, but Stranger Things is an interesting thing because that was one thing that they weren't expecting to be a success. It was kind of, they just put out this little show and that was almost like a Frozen situation where it blew up way bigger than they ever anticipated that it would be.
I mean, Stranger Things, we can do a whole episode of the cultural shift that Stranger Things caused. This thirst for retro 80s nostalgia, this neon drenched post-futuristic vibe that everyone loves now because I think Stranger Things really helped to get there.
In a way, I think even Dark started to take allusions and influences from Netflix.
Oh, yes, for sure.
You know, like I saw the trailers for that. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure this is good, but like this has this has Stranger Things written all over it. You know,
I watched the first season, and not only does it have Stranger Things written all over it, but it has Netflix written all over it too. And that's another thing I kind of wanted to dive into. You know, Hulu and Amazon and HBO, they all have their, you know, direct to stream shows. And that's what you have to have as a streaming service this day and age. You got to have original programming as well to keep people's thirst and hunger for content going. And the one thing I kind of learned is, you know, Netflix, their shows, not everything benefits from being uploaded all at once. Like, for example, Lil Dicky,
to me, it almost kills it.
Yeah, I recently watched Lil Dicky's Dave, and while that show came out once a week, I actually enjoyed that experience more because I think if I would have watched it back to back way too quick, I wouldn't have been waiting for that next episode. I'm a sucker for that kind of show, and I admit that show has as much flaws as it does good things, but the point is, like, the week to week was very charming, and I enjoyed it. Same thing with I Know This Much Is True.
Or even go back to The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian, to me, like, that show does not have besides the fact that it's Disney Plus's big, like, besides all the other things that show had going for, you know, Disney Plus's first big original show, you know, the first Star Wars live action show, you know, but all of that going into it, you know, like, to me, the majesty of that show, part of it is the fact that you did have only an episode a week and you had to wait a week in between episodes. That way you could actually, you know, that way you could actually, you would have something to look forward to. And to me, like, part of the problem with Netflix is the fact that because they drop their stuff all at once, and so many people, again, because we're so used to that binge culture. Now, I know people who will stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning when Netflix drops their stuff and just binge all the episodes all at once. And first of all, I'm like, why are you willing to put your body through that much and take up that much time just to watch a Netflix original, especially when half of them are not even going to be that good, you know? And it just takes so much of the majesty out of it, because now, rather than actually having something that you wait a week for and that could build up the anticipation and could build up and make the story just that much more lingering in your mind, you know, instead now you just get something over with and you're like, okay, on to the next thing. On to the next disposable thing, you know? And that just kills me, because besides the fact that it, we've been saying this whole time, it devalues their content and it kind of devalues their brand in a way, it also just reduces the ability of anything to have any lasting staying power, you know? And that, to me, I know a lot of people take that for granted now, but to me, that is a big part of the cinematic viewing experience, is being able to go back and rewatch something, God only knows how many, like maybe a year or two later, and have a completely different perspective on it, you know?
Yeah, and I think it really does devalue their content when, for example, Netflix will drop like 8 originals at once on a Monday, and then the next week they drop like 12, and then the next week they drop 7. They're always dropping so much. It's like, okay, well, not everything's going to be good. But I guess we kind of live in a world where, the statistic is true that the average attention span of human beings has dropped drastically since the introduction of social media, and B, maybe quantity over quality is what people want nowadays. People probably just need the constant stimulation, just the constant, oh, cool, here's this, here's that, flashing in my face, give me something new, It's just materialism has gotten out of control, I think, which partly dictates just how Netflix is able to get away with such a, because if you really look per capita about how many shows of theirs have actual fan bases that aren't just there to meme them or make fun of them versus the ones that are terrible, I think there's a lot more terrible ones. I have no data. All I have is my gut and what I've read on social media, but I don't think I'm alone in that sentiment by far.
Me neither. Not at all. Yeah. And especially given that, like, I guess to me, like, the whole idea is that obviously because YouTube it's funny because YouTube's model is what Netflix seemed to be following the most, where YouTube's profit came from the fact of you would just get these guys doing outlandishly stupid things that were just like moronic, like your Logan Pauls, all those guys like that didn't really actually have like any sort of meaning to it. It was just visual flash and just thing to be consumed. And Netflix, to me, seems to be taking all the wrong lessons for that, where there's like, screw it, why do we need to actually worry about quality? We can just put all this stuff out and there's somebody is going to watch it, just for sheer fact of just because we are just that well known. Our brand is that well known. And we know that there is an app, that we have our app on literally every single person on the planet's phone,
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is kind of a great example of cornering a market early on. And
absolutely
staying established as one of the top competitors. Obviously, there are, we have our Disney Pluses, our Hulus, our HBO Maxes. There are other big players in the sphere now, Amazon Prime, for example. But I mean, by far and large, Netflix is still the king of streaming. Absolutely. And I don't see that really changing anytime soon. The only one who I can really see posing a big threat is Disney. But we all kind of see how that's going with Corona shutting down production on all the Marvel originals and more of the Star Wars originals.
Yeah, Corona seems to have put a big halt to everything. But at the very least, Netflix seems to be like, the problem with Netflix is they have so much stuff on the backlog that they could just literally just throw stuff out. Like the whole thing is that I think they were going to release The Five Bloods closer to like later on in the year in order for it to qualify for Oscars. But now, because Corona shut everything down, they could just release it in the summer and basically have it almost like be the equivalent of like a big summer blockbuster, But again, even to that sense, I'm like, who outside of our circles was talking about The Five Bloods? I know nobody that actually watched it,
Yeah, I think more people outside of our film critique and commentation circle talked about The King of Staten Island, which was a VOD movie. You had to spend $20 to get that movie. Then they did The Five Bloods. Both equally acclaimed directors, both great in their own right. But the thing is, one had marketing, one didn't.
Yes.
And not absolutely. That Netflix needs the marketing, but right. I just think at the end of the day, will their service be around in 10 to 15 years at the same level of strength that it is now if they keep having all these at-bats with no hits like they do? You know what I'm saying?
It's definitely going to be interesting to see, especially since also now, again, I still think we're still too new into the phase, but obviously if there's one thing that Corona has shown, it's that if you have to ask people what they would rather do in terms of going out to the movies to watch a new movie versus paying for something for VOD at home, that way they could, paying $20 at home for the whole family as opposed to paying $20 a person at the theater with little kids, that market, it's still relatively new and it still has to be explored. And I still think that it's really only going to work for a very specific amount of movies. I don't think that obviously, again, the big budget spectacles that they put millions upon millions of effects money into, those still need the theater revenue. Like, there's a reason why Disney is not dropping Mulan on Disney Plus just yet, but they can afford to take the hit with Artemis Fowl. But that, to me, is going to be a market avenue that is going to be very interesting developing, even once we're on the hindsight of everything that's going on with Corona, because that, to me, is already something that studios were floating around with. But the whole thing is, again, how Netflix was able to kind of circumvent that is because Netflix would pay the studios the difference that they would have lost on marketing for a majority of these bad movies. Like the reason why Cloverfield Paradox was such a huge success is because the fortune that Paramount would have lost paying to market that movie was completely made up for by Netflix buying that, dropping one little teaser bit during the Super Bowl saying this movie is on Netflix now, and then Paramount being like, okay, that's Netflix's problem now. We made our money, you know? And Netflix is just laughing to the bank because everyone basically got trolled by a very mediocre movie. But again, like I even wrote an article about it at my newspaper. I'm like, to me, like the story here is not the movie itself. The story here is this marketing because call it what you will, like Netflix has pulled off something that nobody has ever done before. And this is like the next in a string of things that they have done as far as that's concerned, you know, and that is worthy having a conversation about.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm hating on Netflix by any means. If anything, I respect the shit out of it because
me
they
too.
Single-handedly have created cult hits and hits with no marketing.
Yeah,
with zero marketing.
Not to mention,
and also they've.
Yeah.
I think they're sorry. No, I just think they're a big reason why people are getting in our generation used to and acquiring a taste for the foreign film. Look at Roma. Look at all of their extensive. They have a lot of amazing South Korean films on there that I'm just scratching the surface on. Look at the BBC deal that they have. BBC's shows go direct to US for the most part.
Not to mention the fact that they've also kind of allowed for certain genres that just stopped being profitable in the theaters to have a whole new life and avenue. You know, like as Sandler kind of broke the barrier with that, you know, with all of his comedies. You know, like Pixels was the last theatrically released comedy that he did. And even though I don't know how Sandler's movies have been doing box office wise, I think they've been on a little bit of a dip since Jack and Jill. But Netflix has offered like a whole new avenue, you know, because now the whole argument that Adam Sandler's movies are crappy has almost become a meme in and of itself, that Netflix is used to market all this thing because they know that Murder Mystery and The Do-Over and The Ridiculous Six and Sandy Wexler and every other god-awful movie that he's done, they know that it's crap, but they don't care because there's an audience for that, you know? Not to mention the fact that it is allowed for certain other, like to me, the two biggest genres that they've allowed that just stop being profitable in theaters. You know, again, the mid-level budget movies for adults, that being the Oscar haters, those still have a little bit of a ways to go because the problem is that for the most part, the Oscars still are very anti-Netflix. Like to me, they're like, only been very few and far between, and big movies that people thought were going to be big Oscar winners for Netflix ended up getting nothing. Let's just look at last year, like Marriage Story and The Irishman, and the two movies both got like what? Marriage Story got one Oscar win, and The Irishman I don't think got a single Oscar win. Like not
just noms. Yeah, I think just
noms. And again, that does great for publicity, but I definitely know that like in terms of like, again, there still seems to be that old traditional mindset in Hollywood that is still very anti-Netflix, but that's no surprise. But it's as far as like certain genres go, Netflix has allowed for the traditional comedy, the coming of age story, and the rom-com to have a whole new avenue in life, you know, because I see a lot of people talking about all these movies, again, the sitcom again, but like I'm just talking specifically all these movies like P.S. I Love You, The Love Booth, you know, The Love whatever, The Kissing Booth. There was this movie that came out last year called what's it called? Always Be My Maybe with Randall Park and Ali Wong that was very, very well liked and received, you know, and like those movies, again, like it was almost like a running joke last year how every single mainstream big budget, every single mainstream comedy that went to theaters flop, you know, Booksmart flop, Long Shot flop, Stuber flop, and that just seemed to be like the continuing trend of comedies. But there were all these Netflix comedies, you know, look at the Lovebirds, which would have tanked in Netflix and was already gonna die because it obviously wasn't getting released in theaters. Like they cut their losses and just put that right on Netflix. Same thing with the King of Staten Island. They didn't go the Netflix route, but they realized how early it was in the cards that movie probably King of Staten Island is a little bit of a different story because that might have done well in theaters because I think Pete's enough of a celebrity that he would have been able to sell that movie on name alone. But even still, like that movie to me was as well received as it was because it went direct to VOD, you know? So there's those things to consider as well.
I think if you yeah, no, 100%, man. And I think if you look at a movie like Lovebirds, it kind of had a life only because it was on Netflix and because they quickly, you know, signed a deal and said, hey, look, this thing wasn't testing well to begin with anyway. So we got to get this thing out of the theaters as soon as we can, Corona or not.
Yep.
So Netflix is good for that. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm hating on Netflix, but I think I have sort of noticed that the scripts that get picked up by Netflix sort of feel a different way when you watch them. They get you into that next episode for better or for worse, rather than like an HBO original. Like, and I Know This Much Is True, which is a slow burn. I haven't really felt that too much from a binge-worthy show.
Same.
You know, and that's fine. You need that. You need that too. People like that. So I think I just hope people realize that it's not the end all be all, and that there's always going to be better products on all ends of the spectrum if you actually have competition in the space that you're creating in. For example, there's a big thing going on right now in the gaming community where Twitch seems to be the only platform that is the place to go to watch people stream and play video games.
Yeah, I haven't been seeing too much of that because the whole thing is PewDiePie started that whole trend on YouTube, and PewDiePie was like one of the first like multi-million-dollar people on YouTube with gaming streaming, and now that seems to have completely jumped ship to a different platform.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube owns. I just listened to a podcast about this earlier today. Twitch owns like I think 91% of the marketplace. YouTube owns like 6%. Then Microsoft owns like the remaining scraps, and then there's a few other companies that are just barely hanging on. But because Twitch owns the majority of the share, they kind of abuse their creators a lot. You know, they pass these content things where one day they can play a snippet of a song and the other days they can't, and they sort of like beat the people up in a sense who are providing them with the content. You got to remember, Netflix, Twitch, YouTube, they're just places that we go to get the content. The people uploading to those services are the reason that those places exist. So that's why you need competition, you know,
Yes.
because Twitch right now is just abusing their creators, and it is a different kind of content, but the same way we binge like a Stranger Things, there are millions of people who binge just people playing through a video game series, you know?
Yep.
And you need that competition. And it's just, to me, it's like, I just hope people kind of see this episode that we're in the middle of, but sort of wrapping up now, and realize like, okay, yeah, like they're not saying Netflix is bad, because I'm not. I love it. I'm always on
Same.
Netflix.
Like I said, I'm still on Netflix. Like I said, regardless of my problem with their originals, again, like Netflix has allowed me to rewatch two of my favorite shows with Community and Avatar that for the most part, again, I wouldn't have been able to watch otherwise, you know? I mean, I know Community's been on Hulu for a while, but again, like I'm not paying for Hulu just to get flooded with ads, you know?
And once Community went to Netflix is when it really hit a second life.
Absolutely.
You know?
Like arguably like a bigger life than it ever had when it was on the air, you know?
But just realize that it's never good for one company to own the lion's share, because then it's their way or the highway.
Exactly.
And so if you enjoy shows like I Know This Much Is True, or, you know, even older shows like you brought up, like Breaking Bad, and, you know, early Game of Thrones, where it was like that week to week, like slow burn, you're thinking about it at the water cooler, so to speak.
Even up until the final season, as terrible as it was with that last season, you were still watching it week to week just to see what happened, you know? And that, again, that's a whole different discussion in and of itself. But like, again, like it's part of the majesty of these shows. It's part of the majesty of the TV experience in general.
Yeah, and think about how it is still fun to sort of binge a show and talk about it all at once with your friends, like I do every time Stranger Things comes out on our podcast, and then whoever I hang out with for the next 2 to 3 weeks after that. But there's also like even more of a charm getting super analytical and like talking about week to week, like, oh my God, what's going on the island? Is Jack dead? Is he alive? Is John Locke the Man in Black? You know what I mean? Really nitpicking
all those
dissecting
fan theories again, like that's part of the fun, you know? Because the other thing too about like, again, like why I hate how the internet has so like change the idea of the fan, and how the idea of being a fan of something is almost like this negative term, you know, this negative toxic term, you know, that we talked about on our Star Wars thing. But back in the day, to be a fan of something like that was actually really cool, you know, because it allowed for a whole different type of viewing experience, you know, and it allowed you to be in these communities with these people that could just that were all into this one thing, you know, that was for the most part a really well done story that was getting you enraptured and getting you to think about this stuff in a whole new way. And now that sort of thought process almost become like a gimmick and a way for and just like another shameless marketing tactic that shows that this content uses against us, you know, because for the most part it's all just lazy, cheap stuff with no payoff that's just meant to get you into it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. So for me, again, to summarize, which is really just me reiterating what I kind of just said, it's not that I'm hating on Netflix. I love a lot of Netflix shows, but I think there needs to be competition in the marketplace, because, you know, someone else could have a great idea. Think about if Amazon didn't have Prime, we may have never have gotten The Boys, and look how big of a hit that was.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be one way or the highway. You know, and binging isn't everything either. You know, there's multiple ways to appreciate art, and I just hate when people try to corral you into one train of thought, especially with how much of an echo chamber social media is, and modern companies who are on social media become eventually. It's not a bad thing. Like I said, I'm on Netflix every night, falling asleep to a comedy, Avatar as of late, but there's other things too. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And like to me, like, if I could just give them a bit of advice, I think it's still a big missed opportunity. The fact that they didn't rely on like holding down those contracts for the older shows, you know, because to me, like you even mentioned, like The Office found a whole new life on Netflix and became like their most watched thing, you know. And again, I feel like they gave up way too easily when it came to maintaining the rights to that. because they just wanted to focus more on original stuff, you know, like and like I just think that's such a tremendous missed opportunity, you know, and because you saw the whole new life the community had, and Avatar, I'm sure, is providing so many views for them, you know, they get like probably get like a decent amount of views from like a few of like their big cult movies, you know, whenever they push them, when the Karate Kid goes back on, and when they bring Cobra Kai on, you know, that's going to be a tremendous hit for them, you know, because of all the nostalgia factor, you know, like Netflix to me, especially with Stranger Things seemed to kind of kick this off. Netflix, to me, their big train was nostalgia and being able to catch up and just having a place that was just one place where you could go and watch all your stuff. And now, like to me, they royally screwed up by letting all that stuff get away, by letting NBC like buy back the rights to The Office and all their shows. You know how they're
Parks and Rec is gone in I think a year or so.
Yeah, how they're gonna be able to hold Seinfeld there, I have no idea. Because if you think that, because if once this Peacock app that NBC Universal is trying to launches, and people do end up going there in order to watch The Office, like I said, because we've seen how well some of these other streaming platforms do as opposed to Netflix. That's why I'm not too concerned, but I still think it's a big missed opportunity, you know. And that to me, again, like just from a business standpoint, if I were in charge, that to me is where I would be focusing, because I also think that because if we were focusing on that in order to get views, that would allow them to put much more thought and process into delegating and specifying the types of original content that they would get, and that would allow them, to me, to really push forward what could be a new It show. And we might get another House of Cards, we might get another Mindhunter, we might get another like BoJack Horseman. You know, like it killed me when Mindhunter, which was one of their most groundbreaking, original, and fascinatingly unique shows, is pretty much canned after 2 seasons because like they just can't hold David Fincher or any of the actors down to contract because they are just too busy with focusing on other stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And they were more concerned with holding down David Fincher with a contract because he was making that Mank movie for them than they were with actually like focusing on Mindhunter. They just use Mindhunter as like another like marketing tool for that.
Yeah, like most kids on the internet and you know, people who contribute to social media, it's always on to the next thing. We can never stay in one moment.
Just
we can
on
never
to the next
focus.
thing, you know.
And, for better or for worse, you know, we may not have Stranger Things if not for that mentality. We may not have BoJack if not for that mentality. But
it's true. But it's funny because even the creators of BoJack have come out, because the creator of BoJack, I believe, is Raphael Bob Waksberg, came out because he had another show that he was trying to do on Netflix, Tuca and Birdie, an animated show, and it got canceled after like 2 seasons because Netflix was just like on to the next thing. And he even said that like their whole mentality had changed because when he was first doing BoJack, the whole thing was that they were willing to work with him and allow him and give him the creative freedom in order to fulfill that story to the max, you know. But like it just scares me because if BoJack was to be released this year, 2020, as opposed to 2014, you know, BoJack never would have had the chance in order to become like the cult hit that it was.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those things where corporate culture is affected by social media culture. And
by just typical pop culture standards, and that's always what is driven the entertainment standard. So,
and we're in a weird era of technology, anyways. But that's a different podcast. Dom, I think we did more than our job here today.
Yeah, definitely. I think we did a really good job of breaking down.
You know?
I guess in order to kind of wrap up this conversation, though,
sure.
Like, so obviously we talked about like kind of it'll be very interesting to see what the future of Netflix will be. But do you think that like this kind of like disposable consumer all mentality, just being a slave to the algorithm and what is the trendiest item, do you think that is going to come back and bite them in the face? Because I always hope that like with Cosmic Karma, and I see that like always trying to be the trendiest thing, it usually does blow up in a lot of people's faces. So do you think that kind of it will blow up in their face in a way that they can actually learn from it? Or do you think they're just going to keep going full steam ahead until they, you know, like what do you think?
Not at all. I think they've been the trendsetter. I think they will continue to be the trendsetter. One of the things is, if you look at someone like me, who is sort of bringing that whole, you know, slave to the algorithm thing to the attention, I'm still subjective to it. I'm still contributing. Right. I'm still actively living day to day by their algorithms, by YouTube's algorithm, by Facebook's algorithm. You know, I complain about social media, but I'm still on it. I see it. But I think there's even less people like me who see it. Or if they see it, they just don't care enough.
Yeah.
You know, because not everyone's a creator. Not everyone has aspirations to one day make a film, one day write a script, one day release a record, you know? Some people just want to, like you said at the very start of this, just come home and unwind and have that algorithm feed them something.
Yep.
So I don't think it's going to change. They're clearly winning. They will continue to win. I don't know. I just hope, hey, you know, if there's an echo chamber, we're putting this out into it. And at least it's something a little different. You know what I mean? That's my angle. I want it to change, but I don't think it will.
Yeah, I get that. It's a whole age-old mentality of what works will work, and we kind of have no choice but to just go along with it. But that's not going to prevent us from talking about it here on the Talking TV podcast, guys. Thanks again for once again tuning into another great episode. This is a fascinating episode. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I really think we kind of like went really in depth with an area that, again, like I feel like not a lot of people are talking about in the kind of, I'm not going to say like the wrong mindset, but kind of like in the correct mindset, So, guys, this is the Talking TV podcast. Thanks so much again for being here. Be sure to leave a like and a comment, and also click the subscribe button if you get the chance. Click the notifications button. That way you get notified every time we have a new video pop up. Again, just as long as you guys keep subscribing to us, the way that you subscribe to Netflix, then we might somehow have a chance of like being big enough so that we can continue to get out this very thought-provoking content on a more out to more of you. Because our goal, as we say, we're the halfway point between critics and commentators. We critique and we commentate.
And let us be your counterculture programming.
Yes.
Let us be your analytical breakdown of the powers that be.
Let us be your cult program for alternative actual entertainment that actually makes you think. You know?
So, and if this is your first time here, well, let me tell you what we're all about. We host watch-alongs every month. We do 2 a month. We just actually last night, at the time of this episode, finished a 10-year anniversary watch-along of Inception. And if you're wondering, okay, I am new here, what is a watch-along? Well, really, it's when me and Dom and a bunch of our friends, fellow commentators, fellow YouTubers, blogs, whatever, people in the film world, we get together and we're sort of your laugh track over the movie playing in the background. We have conversations that pertain and don't pertain to the movie for a few hours, and we just gotta have a good time doing it. We do these type of podcast episodes where lately we've been getting, and they've been very fulfilling, I have to add as well, analytical on certain topics that aren't about like a specific item of the week, a hot button topic of the week, but we also do that as well. And we also, cover things like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, for example, that didn't really have a timely matter when we covered it. We were just like, hey, we both love this movie and let's talk about it. So sometimes we get a little specific on a very niche, fine-tuned topic, but other times we just talk about Netflix and see where it takes us. And last but not least, Dom kills it every Monday with something original that is just his own thoughts. He does top 10 lists. This coming Monday, he has his A24 top 10 movies ranked.
That's actually next Friday. This coming Monday, I have
right.
last in my Marvel ranking series, my final 2 installments, the numbers 2 and 1. And my 2 favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movies next Friday, because we kind of do this alternating thing where we alternating my top 10 list, which are on Fridays, with the watch-alongs. Next Friday, we have my top 10 A24 movies. And guys, like I said, I hope you guys are ready for that, because it's going to be interesting, to say the least. Like I said, you want to talk about niche, counter programming, then look no further than A24.
I read the script too. You have, first of all, some interesting picks for a top 10, but also some even hotter takes. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And we are going to up the ante as well. We're also cooking up a bunch of new ideas. They do take a little time, however, and we want them to be right when you get them, because I think if you are new to us, the one thing you'll quickly learn is that we only do what feels right on the show. We don't force anything, but the ball doesn't stop with just these 3 Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. We have a lot coming down the pipeline, and I would love for Dom to tell you where to find that right now, so you can keep up to date.
Absolutely. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram at Talking TV or Talking TV Podcast. No G. It's that little neon lettering that we have in the corner right there. It looks pretty cool. It was such a cool logo. I still remember. It feels so long ago that we made that logo. Chris.
Yeah, at the same desk I'm sitting at right now.
It's been a while. And of course, like I said, if you get a chance, please leave a like and a comment and a subscribe. We really appreciate it. And Chris, I think that's it. Can I do my thing?
Yeah, Dom, there's only one way that I would ever let this show end, let alone at this point, if it was ended any other way, I'd just be perpetually sad. So if you guys are new here, well, buckle in, strap in your seatbelts, because there's only one way we end this show. Dom, do you have a final message for the people here today?
Watch more fucking movies, people. We out.